The person I chose is actually somebody that I probably met just for an hour. She just spoke kindness. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. She took the positive action as well and made something happen that without her, who knows? Who knows where I would have gone? About 13 years ago, we had our first trip to Cyprus. And I sat there and I just thought, this feels like I can exhale. Just feeling instantly at home. And we've come back every year for the last 13 years. When I was first ordained, I remember the guy that helped to train me, and he said, the first thing you need to do is get yourself a thank you box. When you have that impact, to get a card or a letter or an email or a phone call, or somebody drops by the house with a bottle of wine, or just to say thank you, that's absolutely priceless.
Hello, and welcome back to These Three Things, the podcast that asks which person, place, and treasured possession have made a profound impact upon your life and why. My next guest is the Reverend Chris Burr. Born and raised in Wales, he spent his early career working as a civil servant before his calling to the Church and Theological College beckoned in 1998. In 2001, he was ordained, and his role today is to support ministers across Wales with their professional development. When he's not busy serving God and the community, he can be found happily immersed in his other passion, the weather. There is nothing he enjoys more than collecting and analysing weather data, be it rainfall, cloud cover, fluctuating microclimates, and studying the sun when it bothers to make an appearance. He is the father to 4 grown-up children and has been happily married to his wife Helen for 38 years. Together they share a love for the theatre, and especially musical theatre. A full week in London each year, seeing as many shows as they can possibly squeeze in, takes care of that fix quite conveniently. I have known Chris for quite some time now. He christened my daughter and he led the burial for my father last year. I can vouch that he is the living example of what it means to live a life in service to others and to be led by the law of kindness. A very warm welcome to you, Chris. Thank you so much for being a guest on These Three Things. Before I begin, can I ask you what I ask all my guests? Was it easy for you to choose your list?
First thing I would say is I'm not sure I recognise myself in that introduction there, but thank you for the compliment all the same. Actually, it was quite difficult, but it was really therapeutic, sitting down and reflecting, thinking back on different chapters in my life, different people that I've come across. And what was really good was that analysing the things that had impacted me. Because we meet so many people in so many different contexts, and it might just be a passing, a few minutes, a few hours, a couple of days, but actually those people can really impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I was thinking the other day about a teacher who I saw in Sainsbury's car park, and I thought, my goodness me, you taught me for 1 year in my primary school, and you made me feel better about myself in that year than any other teacher has done through my whole education. I wanted to actually run over and give her the biggest hug, but she was getting in her car. But you're right, there are moments when we go way back into the archive of our life and think that tiny interaction, it's really shaped and changed me as an adult. So let's get stuck in. Let's start with your person, Chris. Who have you chosen and why?
So, there are so many people, we've already said, aren't they, that kind of journey with us through life. You've already mentioned about my wife and my 4 amazing kids as well. But the person I chose is actually somebody that I probably met just for an hour. When I was 18, so a long time ago, unfortunately, I was a lady by the name of Molly Morgan. Now, as an 18-year-old, if you just imagine me with long blonde hair, a few earrings, and a silver suit with stars and moons on, I just been through the civil service executive exam and somehow managed to get through that. And they wanted me to post me to the diplomatic service. Now, I'm from Tredegar, which is a small town at the heads of the valleys. And at the time I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up in Bolivia or Bangladesh or Mongolia. So I turned that down. So they didn't quite know what to do with me. So they said, well, you've passed the exam, you've passed the interviews, but we don't quite know what to do with you. So being a very naive and a bit of an arrogant 18-year-old, I walked from my home in Tregear to Ebervale, which was the nearest DHSS as was in the day. I walked across the head of the Valley Road. I remember it. I had my silver suit with stars and moons and cowboy boots on, with my blonde hair flaying in the wind. And I went to that big DSS building and knocked on the door and just said, could I speak to the manager, please? And of course, what they should have said is, good grief, of course you can't, and sent me packing. But actually, they rang up from the counter, and this lady, Molly Morgan, said, of course, send him up. So I spent an hour that afternoon with Molly Morgan, who at that time was the manager of the DHSS in Ebervale. And she, Deb, just sat me down and just was so kind to me and just spoke such wisdom about what it must be like to be an 18-year-old and having to decide your future and the pressure I must have been under. And what she did is that she rang another local office down in Blackwood and said, look, I've got somebody with me, and basically, have you got any vacancies? And they did. So I went down the following week and met the manager there, a lady called Jill. And I started work a couple of weeks later as a supervisor on the incapacity benefit section at the DSS in Blackwood. And other than a phone call to thank Molly for her time, that's really the only contact I've had with her from that day to this. But she opened a door for me and reminded me, whatever context we're in, that little act of kindness actually makes such a difference.
Oh, I love that, because, you're right. As an 18-year-old boy, it stuck with you, but you might not have known in that moment just how many people would have palmed you off and said, no, sorry, nothing here. I mean, we see it all the time, don't we? Yeah, if you could just leave your CV. But that one person who goes out of their way to say to you, do you know what? I've been in your shoes before. This is your first job. I can sense that it's really important. Even if I can't get you the job, I can give you a little bit of my time just to guide you through the process. And it's made this indelible mark. And here you are, some however many years later, still remembering Molly Morgan. So how does that look? Her kindness in your life then, how has it been paid forward in your life?
Well, we're all busy people, aren't we? We're all busy people. And the temptation very often, whether my career in the civil service or as a Christian minister, it's sometimes it's hard to carve out time. But I've remembered Molly, and I've remembered that little act of kindness. And I speak a lot about this, and I wish I could offer more people more time. But it's just about making the other people feel that they're valued. And that's what she did in a time when most phone calls were, I'm really sorry. When you're 18, you're straight out of school. I decided I didn't want to go to university. I wanted to get a job, hence the civil service exams. And she just spoke wisdom to me. And she just said, look, you've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't panic, because I was panicking slightly. Don't panic. Let's see what we can do. And she just spoke kindness. And sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. And I felt that she heard where I was, but she also she took the positive action as well and made something happen that without her, who knows where I would have gone.
Well, not only did she take the action, but she, luck would have it, you got the job that day.
I mean, the weird thing, Deb, they said yes before they met me. And I still remember walking in to that department in Blackwood, and I loved my time in Blackwood DSS. And I walked straight in as supervisor, and I, with the same silver suit with stars and moons on, and the same cowboy boots, and my big George Michael earrings and long blonde hair. And they must have thought, oh my word, this guy straight out of school, this 18-year-old. But I loved it, and I honestly believe that Molly Morgan really set that up for me. I'm so indebted to her.
I'd love to ask where Molly Morgan is, but I imagine she's in heaven right now.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I hope so, because I'm hoping it's a nice place. But yes, I mean, she was a. When you're 18, everybody looks elderly over the age of 30, don't they? Let's be honest. And I imagine she was, unless she's hanging on in there, I suggest she's probably having a gin and tonic right now and looking down and hopefully having a smile as well.
Well, this is the thing about doing this podcast. For the guests we've had on, some have managed to send their recording to that person. And the response has been so beautiful because people had no idea the profound impact that they had made on the guest's life. And some, like you, have spoken about people who've passed over. So, Molly, wherever you are in the world, in this plane or the next, then here's to you, because your kindness went a long way. And I'm kind of hoping now, actually, that your treasured possession is the silver suit, but we'll come to that in a minute. Lovely. That's amazing, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do have to ask this, though. Did you walk the heads of the valleys all the way home as well to Tredegar?
I did. I walked all the way across in my cowboy boots. I deserved my audience with Molly Morgan that day, I feel. So, yes, I mean, I didn't learn to drive until I was 19. So, and I just thought, let's walk over. What's the worst that she could say? She could have said no, which is what I expected. But she didn't. She said yes, exactly.
To Molly. Okay, let's go on now to your place. I'd love to hear that special place that you've chosen where you go to in life or return to where you feel the peace and the joy and where you exhale. Where have you chosen and why?
So this is an interesting one. So I was a vicar, a parish priest for best part of 20 years. And the thing is, as a parish priest, you don't have your own home. So we lived in some wonderful places, some lovely vicarages, but it never felt like ours. And the vicarage was, the place where people would knock on the door or the phone would go. And, it was kind of felt like a public place, even though it was our home. So I'm not saying I never felt at home there, but it was always public property, really. So although we have our own home now, about 13 years ago, we had our first trip to Cyprus. And there's a particular place in Cyprus called Queen's Bay or Sunset Bay, some people call it. And it's nothing particularly to look at, really, in lots of ways. It's not a lovely white sandy beach. It's a pebbly beach. The sea is just always a little bit more volatile there than round and about because of the way that the inlet lies. And there's a busy road behind it. And I'm not really setting the scene terribly well there, am I? But I remember coming here and sitting on a little bench that was there overlooking the sea. And it was a beautiful day. The waves were pounding, so much so that the spray was flying in the cars behind me on the road. But the sea was a deep, deep turquoise. And I sat there and I just thought, this feels like I can exhale. And I can remember sitting there and just feeling instantly at home. And we've come back, apart from the COVID year, every year for the last 13 years. And it's the first thing that goes into our diary is our trip back to Queen's Bay. And it just feels like my place. And it's just, I just feel rooted here in a way, weirdly, that I didn't at home.
Yeah. And you're there now?
Well, yes, I didn't want to give that away.
I know that you're in Cyprus right now recording this. So just tell the listeners, have you been to this bench yet? Have you been to this special place?
We only arrived. The reason I look like this is we arrived late last night.
You look great.
But well, thank you. I'm sat here and I'm looking out the window there and I'm looking over the bay. And as soon as the recording is over, I'm going to jump in the car and I'm just going to go down there and sit on my bench. So I've not had chance this time round, but we passed it yesterday on the way to our place. And I just thought, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. But already it just feels like being home.
Are you in a meditation when you get there? Do you just take your time just to sit and obviously look out to the waves and look out to the sea? I mean, that in itself is, a heavenly meditation. But do you Where do you find yourself sort of going in thought when you're there on that bench?
It's what I would call restorative. And I sit there and you can just, I don't know about you, Deb, I'm one of those people that my mind jumps a lot. I compartmentalize things and it jumps from one thing to the next. But I sit there and I look out and it's just as if a cloak comes over you and you can just feel all of that melting away and just being in that moment, if that makes sense. No phone, nobody knocking on the door, and just being able to let your mind almost go blank and just look out and just think, you know what, how lucky am I in this stunning place just to be able to completely switch off. And I think that's why it feels like a special place. Just sat on that bench, however busy, however manic work can be sometimes, I just think, do you know what, in 6 months, I'm going to be back there. In 3 months, I'm going to be back there. In a month, I'll be back there. And look, I'm here. And it's just sometimes that shot in the arm that we all need, that just the reset button, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you been there in all weather? I know you love the weather, which I think is brilliant. I can see you as a weatherman in the next life. But have you been there in all weathers? Have you sat there sort of in storms? Because I know Cyprus is baking hot right now, but have you been tempted to go in different seasons and just see what that whole landscape looks like?
Yeah, I mean, we've normally come in the summer, but we've been quite a few times in April, several times in April, and it's just a little bit cooler. But where we normally stay is kind of pitched up on cliff overlooking the bay. And it's a little bit breezier, it's a little bit more cloudy, but you can see for miles. So you can just see if there's a storm out to sea that drifts in. And last year we were over here and we had an almighty thunderstorm. It was amazing. And it was just like the icing on the cake for me. We were just sat outside and the rain and the thunder and the lightning was just phenomenal. And I just thought, thank you, God. That was just for me. I mean, everywhere looks different in the sunshine, doesn't it? We know that. And there's something about the light sometimes around the Mediterranean. It's just a different kind of light that we get back home. But actually, you can get quite dramatic weather here. And I've been early in the year in the Troodos Mountains in the centre of Cyprus. There's a ski resort. So you can jump in the car for about an hour and you can go from the beach and be skiing, which is just phenomenal.
Have you done that? Have you been skiing there yet?
Oh, I'm the least coordinated person you could ever wish to meet, Deb. Honestly, I'm more a sitting, having a glass of wine, watching everyone having fun kind of guy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And tell me, going back to this bay, can you actually access the sea from where you are? Have you swum there, or is it a bit too rocky?
No, you can. It can be quite volatile, but there's also like a little outcrop of rock, and it almost forms a lagoon. So even if the sea is quite rough and choppy, and maybe not advisable, you go around that crop, and it's always quite calm, and it's about 5 degrees warmer. So it's just floating there really, and you can do that whatever the weather. There's always that calm patch.
Yeah. I love what you said though about you get there and nothing else really exists. You can just be. And I feel that way when I reach Pembrokeshire, when I reach Newport. That was my place for many, many years. And, I still go back. But there's something about getting there where there's no phone reception and you get onto the beach. And it's like all the stress leaves my body and I go really back into the moment. And I can walk the length of that beach and I feel, well, if I'm going to be honest, I feel the presence of God straight away because I feel this real beauty and calm. And there is also with it a sense of melancholy. I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's like my soul walks that beach when I'm asleep. And it's quite happy to be in Pembrokeshire. But I really understand that connection to being near the sea and in your own meditation, and you can be alone for hours and not feel alone. That's the thing. It just sings to you in a way that maybe other landscapes don't.
Yeah, and different people will have significant places for lots of different reasons. A person, a chapter in their life, a particular time. For me, you mentioned the word exhale. For me, it's just a place, and we all need it, don't we? It's just a place where you can figuratively close the door and just be in that moment. And so having analyzed lots of amazing places, and it's a special place. And for me, it kind of feels like home as well. So it's a double win.
Would you ever buy somewhere there? I mean, would you see yourself with Helen going more and more as time goes by?
Helen, Helen's a different kind of sort to me. I mean, I'm an explorer really, and even when we're away, even on holidays now, myself or maybe one of the kids, if they're with us, will be up in the morning, and where are we going today? Then what we're going to do? And Helen's more of a flop and drop kind of gal, which makes total sense to me with the busyness of life. So Helen will sit by the pool, and I'll probably go off exploring. But she will come and sit on the bench with me now and again. So, I mean, Cyprus is so hot that's what I would say. And it's going somewhere like this when all you have to do is just walk from here to the sea or into the pool is one thing. Living somewhere like this, maybe the rest of the year, but probably through summer might be a little bit too hot. But yeah, I've always said, actually, I would love to have somewhere, maybe where as a family, we could invest in where the children can come and grandchildren in time, maybe. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. And every rainy day we have back in Wales, I'm like, see.
When you're collecting the weather data, yes, I can see it now. Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Chris. The Mediterranean, there's nowhere like it, is there? So let's go on now to your treasured possession, if I may ask. Of all the things that you own or have consumed over the years, if you could hold on to one treasured item, what have you chosen and why?
So I found this probably the most difficult to nail down because we accumulate so much, don't we? And there's that one thing that you look at and you think, oh, that represents that, or I remember that, or something special happened there. So that was quite difficult because when you're as old as I am, Deb, you surround yourself, don't you, with stuff from various chapters of your life. So that was quite hard. But in the end, and this kind of goes back to Molly Morgan a little bit. In the end, I chose what I call my thank you boxes. Now, when I was first ordained, I remember the guy that helped to train me, and which is why I love my job now, training others. And he said, the first thing you need to do is get yourself a thank you box. And he said, because actually ministry, like so many other vocations, it's tough. It's tough. And there'll be lots of difficult days. And of course, as a Christian minister, you have a wide range of experiences and roles. And you mentioned about, christening your daughter and also taking dad's funeral as well. So the skill set, of course, is very different for that. And, sometimes you just parachute in to really complex situations and really difficult times in people's lives. And it's what I would call the Molly Morgan effect. I try and think, how can I make this hour count? How can I make somebody feel valued in this time? It's what I call God with skin on. That's what I aspire to do. And you do that freely and willingly. But now and again, when you have that impact, to get a card or a letter or an email or a phone call, or somebody drops by the house with a bottle of wine, or just to say thank you, that's absolutely priceless. And it's like storing up all the sunshine from a beautiful day that you just open the box to when it's raining outside. And I can just sit there. And I've done over 1,000 funerals in my time. So I'm so honored and gifted to be able to do that. But it takes time for somebody to sit down and write to you. So over the years, I've just kept, I think, pretty much every single one. And some of these people from maybe 20 years ago, I can't remember anymore because I'm old and my memory's terrible. But I read that, addresses I remember. I was a visiting officer in the DSS for a long time, so you remember addresses as much as you remember people. And you read them. And I was reading them a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this, and the tears were just rolling down my cheeks. Because now and again, you'd remember a really difficult situation or complex one. And just to get a thank you for somebody to sit down and take the time to do that is priceless. So when you get a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, to sit down and indulge myself with a cappuccino and just go through some of these letters from teenagers, from children, as well as, some of them will just get you right there still. And there was one that I was reading, and I remember this gentleman from a place called Bather near Pontypridd, and his wife had died quite young. And he started off by saying, I don't believe in God, Vicar. I said, well, that's okay, I do. So we will go from there. That's all right. And he was quite difficult in the visit and kind of pushed back, because at the end of the day, he absolutely adored his wife, and whatever we did could never be a reflection of her. And I really felt that and understood it. And to get his letter and to read that again the other day of saying, do you know what? She would have smiled from beginning to end. She would have absolutely loved that. And honestly, Deb, the tears were just rolling down my cheek. So for me, it's that. I never want to let go of those. And as I say, on a difficult day, you think, do we really impact others in the way that we'd like to? I can say, well, at least in that moment, on that particular day, I did. And that is priceless. That's priceless for me.
Absolutely. And as you're saying that, I know that those things actually, they gain more value the older we get, as we kind of give up our stuff and we look around and we do a clear out and go, do we need all these things? We don't need any of it, do we really? And actually the treasure boxes of notes, handwritten notes as well. It's so lovely to get a handwritten something, and they go into this box, and then, like you said, you find them years later and reread them. And it just pierces a piece of your heart. And can you, when you read, how many have you got? Have you got like several boxes full?
I've got 3 large boxes. There must be hundreds and hundreds of notes in there, which is really humbling. And the other one I read actually was on a scrap of paper, really. I'd done a funeral for a boy and his family. He was 15 and his mum had died. And that was really difficult. And I remember at the funeral visit, he didn't speak at all. And I said to him on the way out, look, if there's anything you want to say, just write it down and just get it to me before the funeral takes place. And he actually handed it to me on the way into the church as we were walking ahead of the coffin. And I didn't read it until I got into the pulpit. And we were on the first hymn. And I thought, I better read this now, because I promised him whatever he said, I'd read out. Deb, the language, honestly, I'm a Tredegar boy, so the language I'd not come across before. So I did a bit of a disclaimer, and I just said, look, but it was important. It was his words, and he wrote me a little thank you note on a scrap of paper that again I read the other day going through my box, and the language again was quite choice. But he just, around the outside of the paper, he just written, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because for him, it was so important that he could say something about his mum, and he couldn't put it, I would have flowered it up or made it, but it was raw, but he meant it. So to read that again was just stunning, absolutely stunning.
You've got me now. You see, I've gone. I go in most episodes, but that's it. I'm absolutely over the edge now with that little note. Oh, Chris, this has been so lovely. I really hope you've enjoyed recording your 3 things, because there's to Molly Morgan and to that beautiful Sunset Bay in northern Cyprus.
Yes, yeah, Queen's Bay, Sunset Bay.
Queen's Bay, Sunset Bay. Enjoy the sunset tonight with that lovely glass of wine. And also the 3 boxes of handwritten notes and thank you cards that you've collected in your service of being a vicar and a reverend. Thank you for offering these today. I really hope you've enjoyed the process. We've loved having you on.
It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I've really, really enjoyed it.
I'm so pleased to hear that. God bless, and see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
And there we have it. A huge thank you to you, our listener. We are growing our community and kindly ask that you be a valued link in this chain. For these 3 things to exist and continue, we need you to please press subscribe or follow now. You can do this on your preferred podcast platform. We will keep you updated on all our community news, and you'll be the first to catch all new episodes. A rating or thoughtful review is greatly appreciated and helps others to find our show. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of our treasured community.